we're going to talk about the 5 types of wealth. And I'm going to begin with a question. If you were the main character in a movie of your life, what would the audience be screaming at you to do right now? We've all been there, watching a movie or television show, and we just want to jump through the screen and grab the main character, shake them, say, chase that girl to the airport, don't go down in the basement, look out behind you. Whatever that thing is, you are that main character in the movie of your life, and there is something the audience would be screaming at you right now. So what is it? What is that thing that is so blindingly obvious from the outside looking in that you are either choosing to ignore or have yet to create enough perspective to see? I want you to think about that question in the few minutes that I have with you today, and then in the days and weeks ahead. And then I want you to take one tiny action against your answer to it. Because that one tiny action could be the thing that fundamentally changes the trajectory of your life. It certainly did for me. Now, this is not going to be a talk about me, but the things I speak about are very much a manifestation of my own journey. So I think it makes sense to begin here with a little bit of my story. I come from an unlikely collision of 2 worlds. My mother was born and raised in Bangalore, India. She was the 3rd daughter of something of a rebellious spirit. She had her whole life mapped out for her. She was going to get an arranged marriage and settle down for this stable life. My father was born and raised in the Bronx, New York, on the other side of the world. Similarly, had his entire life mapped out for him by an overbearing, domineering father. He was going to marry a Jewish girl and settle down for a stable life. Now, fortunately for me, fate, if you believe in that, had different plans. My parents crossed paths over the course of 2 weeks in a Princeton University library. My mother had applied in secret to come to university in the US and was working in the library to pay her way through school. My father was there studying feverishly for his final dissertation defense. My mom, being the rebellious spirit, walked up to my dad and asked him out on a date. They went out on this date, and my dad turned to my mom and he said, "My father will never accept us." My mom was so blinded by his use of the word us that she completely missed the message. And unfortunately, he was right. His father was not accepting of this budding courtship, this idea of his golden child, his son, spurning his wishes and going off down his own path. And he forced my dad into an impossible choice, to choose between my mom and his family. And my dad walked out the door and never saw his family again. To this day, I never met my dad's parents. He has 3 siblings I've never met. I have first cousins out there in the world that I've never met. All on the basis of this one choice, to reject the default path that was handed to them and to choose love, to choose to carve their own path into the earth. When I think about the ripple effect of that one choice, I often joke with my dad today that it took him 28 years to reject that default path. And he beat me by about 2. You see, I spent the first 30 years of my life marching down the most traditional path to what a successful life looks like. I was a pretty insecure kid. I grew up in a household with an Indian mother and a Harvard professor father. So you can guess, I had a little bit of academic pressure. My sister was the high-achieving academic one. And from a young age, I started telling myself this story that I was not very smart. My sister was the smart one, and I had to be something else. What do we know about stories as humans? It's called the narrative fallacy. We look around us and find every single piece of evidence that will confirm the story that we already believe about who we are. And we'll ignore every single piece of evidence that would refute it. It's one of the reasons that with our children, we have to be so careful about the stories they start telling themselves. That story built an insecurity in me, this internal void. And what do we do when we feel that internal void? Well, we look around us for external solutions to the internal problem. The pats on the back, the affirmations, the things that are going to tell you that you are enough, that you feel good, that you are worthy. And in our modern society, there is one tried and true way to get those pats on the back, to get those affirmations. Make a bunch of money. Go out and achieve things. So I did that. I took the job that was the job that sounded good for the LinkedIn post, not the job that I necessarily wanted. I got to say I was humbled and honored to accept some position, which, by the way, no one is ever humbled and honored when they say that. And at every stage on that ladder, I convinced myself that my happiness, my contentment, my fulfillment was on the other side of some achievement, something. The bonus, the promotion, the title, the fancy bottle of wine. It's called the arrival fallacy. I'm willing to bet many of you have felt this. We build up something as being the point at which we are going to wake up and feel different. Everything's going to be different about who we are. I have arrived. It's that idyllic land of success and of happiness. And as I'm sure you've also felt, it is a fallacy. You get that thing, you feel the momentary blip of dopamine-induced euphoria, and then you reset. That familiar dread of never doing enough, of needing to do more. And that's exactly what happened to me. I was going out and achieving in this one domain, but starting to see cracks in all of the others. Most importantly, I was living 3,000 miles away from my parents. Two of my closest friends in the world, they were getting older. I noticed that they were slowing down for the first time. My sister in my relationship had ground to a halt, and my wife and I were facing strain for the first time in the middle of this 2-year battle with infertility. My health was in disarray. You can see the photo here, 40 pounds heavier than I was today. I was drinking 6-7 nights a week. My mental and physical health were struggling. All at this point in my life where from the outside looking in, you would have said I was winning the game. I was doing the things that you're supposed to want to do. But at the end of 2020, I started to have a realization that if that was what winning felt like, I had to be playing the wrong game. And it all came to a head for me with a single conversation in May of 2021. I went out for a drink with an old friend, and he asked me how I was doing. I told him it had started to get difficult living so far away from my parents, that they were getting older, that they were slowing down. And he asked how old they were. And I said mid-60s. He asked how often I saw them. I said about once a year. And he just looked at me and said, okay, so you're going to see your parents 15 more times before they die. Gut punch. I actually had to take a deep breath to avoid an instinctively angry response. Well, my friend wasn't trying to be rude or insensitive. It was just math. If life expectancy is around 80, my parents are in their mid-60s, and I see them once a year, the math, however much I don't like it, says I'm going to see them 15 more times. That was the moment that changed everything. Because in that moment, I realized that my entire definition of success, of what it meant to build and live a wealthy life, had been incomplete. That I was focusing on the one thing at the expense of everything else. And in the aftermath of that conversation, I went home, and my wife and I sat down and had a very candid conversation about what we wanted to build our life around, what our center truly was, what our priorities truly were. And we took a dramatic action. Within 45 days, I had left my job, a high-paying, high-status, fancy-sounding job. We had sold our house in California, and we had moved 3,000 miles across the country to live closer to both of our sets of parents. And in that one decision was a very important realization, which is that you are in much more control of your time than you think. We had taken an action and fundamentally created time. That number, 15, it's now in the hundreds. I see my parents every single week. They're a huge part of my son, their grandson's life. We had taken an action and reassumed agency over our own lives. Realized that we were capable of building our lives around the things that we truly cared about, the priorities that we truly had. Because you see, there are two types of priorities in life. There are the priorities we say we have, and there are the priorities our actions show we have. And oftentimes in life, there's a huge gap between those two things. Your life improves alongside your ability to close that gap. But you cannot close it until you look yourself in the mirror and recognize that it exists in the first place. So this sent me on a journey to try to understand Why had I fallen victim to this trap in the first place? Because I knew if I was falling victim to it, there were millions of other people out there doing the same. And what I realized is that it's actually quite simple. What you measure in life really matters. Peter Drucker said, "What gets measured gets managed." That's the idea, that the things that we measure end up being the things that we myopically, narrowly hone in on and focus around. It's not hard to find examples of this. How many of you have ever put on one of those sleep tracking rings or wristbands, or know someone that has? All of a sudden, you become the most annoying sleep person in the world. Right? Oh, I can't go out with you, my sleep score. I can't get a drink tonight, my sleep score. Right? You got a perfect sleep score, but you got no friends. Great trade. Well, as a society, what is the one way that we measure our life, measure our life's worth? Go into a room and stack ourselves up in the hierarchy of the people that are there. It's money. And unfortunately, while money is part of living a good life, it is far from the only part. So what happens to many people, and what was happening to me, is that you march down the path of winning in this one domain, but losing the much bigger picture war. That is what I call the Pyrrhic victory. This is a story from history. King Pyrrhus of Epirus charges into battle with the Roman Republic, this Roman invader. He fights this bloody multi-day battle on this open plain, and he's victorious. But in the process, loses all of his lead generals and most of his army. After the battle, he is said to have exclaimed, "Another such victory, and we will be undone." That is the idea of the battle won but the war lost, a victory that comes at such a steep cost to the victor that it might as well have been a defeat. That's not just a random history lesson. This is what we want to avoid in life. It is the person that has made hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars, that we pat on the back, that we celebrate, that we admire, and we ignore the fact that they're deeply lonely, that their kids don't talk to them, that they're unhealthy. My entire life changed when I realized that my definition of success was not what I was reading about in books. That I would never want to trade lives with most of the people that I was reading those books about. And so that sent me down this path to try to understand if the current scoreboard is broken, what is a better one? I went and talked to thousands of people across all walks of life over the course of 3 years researching for this book. Young and old, I asked young people, what does your ideal day look like at age 50, at age 80? I asked older people, what advice would you give to your younger self? What regrets do you have about the way you lived? And all across those conversations, 4 themes kept coming up: time, people, purpose, and health. Time, people, purpose, and health. Those ideas, those themes are what form the basis for a new scoreboard, a new way to measure your life. Because when you measure the right things, you can take the right actions to create the right outcomes. Those 5 types of wealth are time wealth, the freedom to choose; social wealth, your relationships; mental wealth, your purpose, your growth, your ability to create space; physical wealth, your health and vitality; and yes, financial wealth. All of this fundamentally comes down to one simple idea, one simple word: lagom. Lagom is a Swedish word that means just the right amount. Just the right amount. It's the idea of enough. What is your lagom? What does enough really mean to you? There's a beautiful story that brings this to light. 2 famous American authors, Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller. They're walking along at this palatial garden estate of this billionaire in the Hamptons when Vonnegut turns to Heller and says, "Joe, how does it feel that just yesterday the owner of this home made more money than your most famous book, Catch-22, made in its entire lifetime?" Heller thinks about it for a second and says, "Yes, but I've got something that he'll never have." Vonnegut says, "Oh yeah, what's that?" "The knowledge that I've got enough." What does that mean? Why did he have the audacity to say that it was worth more than the billions of dollars that this individual had accumulated? This was the recognition that your expectations are your single greatest financial liability. If your expectations rise faster than your assets, you will never feel wealthy. You will never feel rich. You'll just be chasing whatever more the world has told you that you should want. We need to get clear on what enough means to us, what our enough life really looks like. And the most important thing is that it cannot be a number, because numbers have a tendency to do this little mirage, disappearing act. There's a professor at Harvard Business School named Michael Norton. He did a really interesting study on this. He went and asked a group of high net worth individuals, how happy are you on a scale of 1 to 10? Then he asked, how much more money would you need to be at a 10? Across the board, whether they were worth $1 million or $100 million plus, they all said they needed 2 to 3 times as much money to be at a 10. Makes no sense. It boggles the mind. There should just be a happiness number. You get there and you're at a 10. That's not how humans work. The numbers do a disappearing act. You get close to it and it's a little mirage. The antidote to that is to get very clear on what the actual life looks like. Where are you living? What are you doing? What is the vision of the life you are trying to build? What is the money actually for? The best visual of this comes from a parable that I love, though I have a contrarian view on what it actually means. This investment banker, apologies to any investment bankers in the crowd, goes down to this Mexican fishing village. He's walking along the docks and he comes across this fishing boat with a few fish in it. And he asks the fisherman, how long did it take you to catch these fish? The fisherman says, only a little while. The banker says, why didn't you fish for longer? The fisherman replies, well, I have everything I need. In the morning, I fish for a little while, then I go home, I have lunch with my wife and kids, then I take a nap, then in the evening, I go into town, drink wine, play music, and laugh with my friends. The banker's brain is broken. He's like, you got this all wrong. Here's what you got to do. You got to fish for longer so you can catch more fish. Then you use that money to buy a second boat. Then that boat goes out and fishes. You buy a third boat, a fourth boat, a fifth boat, a sixth boat. Pretty soon, you have this whole fishing enterprise. You move to the big city, you take your fishing enterprise public, and you're going to make millions. The fisherman says, and then what? The banker says, and then what? Then you can retire and move to a small fishing town. You can fish for a little while in the morning, then you can go home, have lunch with your wife and kids, then you can take a nap, then you can go into town, drink wine, play music, and laugh with your friends. It's a funny story. But the common interpretation of that story is to say that the banker is wrong and the fisherman is right. I think it's more nuanced than that. It is about the fact that the two have a fundamentally different definition of what it means to have enough. It is perfectly okay and reasonable for the banker's definition of enough to be about building something big, going and chasing this grand ambition, creating jobs, going after this vision. But for him to apply that map of reality to the fisherman's terrain makes no sense. The fisherman's already living his definition of enough. And yet, that is what we do when we take out our phones and we compare our lives to other people. We allow other people's maps of reality to impact how we feel about our terrain. How we get past that is getting very clear on what the life looks like. Where are you living? What are you doing? Who are you with? What are you thinking about? What are you spending your time on? What is the money actually for? It's not about shutting off your ambition. It's about channeling it towards the actual life you are trying to create. So I'm going to end where I began, with this question and my own response to it. Prior to the launch of my book, a few weeks before, I was sitting in my office working very hard on this project for the launch, really focused, when my son, 2.5 years old at the time, came barging in. He started jumping around on the couch, throwing things all over the place, just generally doing 2.5-year-old terrorist-like things. And I started having this very annoyed train of thought. Why is he doing this? This is so annoying. Doesn't he know I'm trying to focus? He should really get out of here. And in that moment, I looked on my desk where I have a photo of the two of us the day he was born. And it snapped me back to 4 years prior, when my wife and I were in the middle of this 2-year struggle with infertility. I had prayed every single night for 2 years that we would one day have a healthy child. And here I was in this moment, complaining about the exact thing that I had prayed for. And it was a reminder to me of a very important fact, which is that sometimes in life, the things we pray for become the things we complain about, if we let them. If we don't catch ourselves, stop and pause and recognize that sometimes you are quite literally living out your prayers. That every single thing you do today is something your younger self dreamed of and something your 90-year-old self will wish they could go back and do. So that's the message I want to leave with all of you today. Recognize that the good old days are happening right now. Thank you so much for the time.